In the 90s, a handful of seminal albums emerged that fused the immediacy of hardcore with the bombastic sonic earmarks of metal. If metallic-minded hardcore elder statesmen like Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, and crossover bands like DRI, Corrosion of Conformity, and Suicidal Tendencies had blurred the lines between hardcore and metal, a new generation emerged to virtually erase those distinctions altogether. Join us and delve into 10 records from this era that not only defined a genre, but also laid the blueprint for its evolution. In June 1991, Integrity's Those Who Fear Tomorrow emerged as an early linchpin of metallic hardcore. Fueled by dual guitar slayerisms and the apocalyptic ravings of frontman Dwid Hellion, the album pushed hardcore into darker, more sinister territory. Recorded at Mars Studio with engineer Bill Korecki, it didn't just blur the lines between hardcore and metal, it redrew them. It was less an album and more a prophecy, a blueprint for the bleak metallic vision of hardcore that followed. Released in May 1995, Earth Crisis's Destroy the Machines wasn't just an album, it was a mission statement, a manifesto for vegan straight-edge ethics delivered with all the subtlety of a brick through a poultry factory window. Pairing uncompromising politics with crushing sonic intensity, it cemented the band's place as pioneers of the hardline movement. Carl Buechner's vocals were less about persuasion and more about an ultimatum, set against chugging riffs that sounded like Slayer slowed down and fed nothing but garden burgers and ideology. The message hit hard, and so did the fans. Destroy the Machines inspired a generation of jock dickheads to treat cigarette smokers like enemies of the state. In 1995, New Jersey's Dead Guy dropped Fixation on a Coworker. Angular dissonant riffs collided with the legitimately terrifying vocals of Tim Singer. This wasn't just heavy, it was claustrophobic and menacing, an auditory indictment of the modern world. Recorded at Trax East by the incomparable Steve Evans, Fixation bridged the gap between AmRep noise rock and what would soon be called mathcore, paving the way for 1,000 bands that wished they could sound this pissed off on purpose. The original lineup unraveled soon after, but Fixation on a Coworker left a crater where it landed. In 1997, Kansas City's Coalesce wrote a mean piece of business. Give Them Rope took everything hardcore had built up to that point and smashed it into jagged, splintered wreckage. The music was chaotic, complex, and punishing in ways that felt barely held together, like a building mid-collapse held aloft by sheer force of will and Sean Ingram's unmistakable roar. Produced by Ed Rose at Red House Studios, Give Them Rope raised the bar for technical aggression. And somehow this was just the beginning. Coalesce would continue to stun, but this record sets the tone. Nothing safe, nothing easy, and absolutely no interest in playing by anyone else's rules. Released in May 98, Cave-In's Until Your Heart Stops marked a sharp left turn for not only the band but metallic hardcore in general. While their peers were still focused on tighter, heavier, more brutal records, Cave-In cracked the whole thing wide open, blending Boston's hardcore aggression with spacey textures, melodic detours, and progressive ambition. Produced by Kurt Ballou at God City, the album layered clean vocals over crushing breakdowns, buried atmosphere inside chaos, and stretched songs far beyond the genre's usual 2-minute fury. Compared to what came before it, it sounded alien, and compared to what came after, it now reads like a last gasp before the band fully shed their hardcore skin. In 1996, Bloodlet's Entheogen wasn't just heavy, it felt cursed. Where most metallic hardcore was all blunt force and speed, Bloodlet dragged things into something slower, darker, and deeply unsettling. Down-tuned guitars lurch and churn like a dying engine. Queasy bass lines snake around tribalistic drumming, locking into sludgy, hypnotic patterns more akin to a ritual than a breakdown, while vocalist Scott Angelikos seemingly channels the fever dreams of some eldritch prophet. Entheogen oozes with atmosphere, thick, suffocating, the wall of sound pierced only by Charlie King's snare sound. That snare sound? Cranked tighter than Tony Brummel's pocketbook when it's time to cut royalty checks. This record was evil in a way that felt completely out of step with the scene around it. This was metallic hardcore as a shamanic bad trip, one that still echoes in the weirder, uglier corners of heavy music and made the quote-unquote rules of hardcore feel irrelevant. Hatebreed, Satisfaction is the Death of Desire, released in November 1997, delivered a brutal mix of hardcore anthems and metallic heaviness that still gets name-dropped as a foundational block of modern hardcore. At just over 24 minutes, the record wastes zero time. Every track is a call to arms, fueled by Jamie Josta's barked affirmations and floor punch eliciting breakdowns. Legend has it Josta started Hatebreed after getting kicked out of a Fugazi show for moshing, which honestly tells you everything you need to know. Satisfaction wasn't about patience, nuance, or restraint. It was about blowing the doors off and daring anyone to flinch. According with Steve Evans, it stripped hardcore to its most primal form. And it didn't just open the floodgates. It handed every kid in a fitted and camo shorts carte blanche to spin kick someone's head off their shoulders. When Calculated Infinity came out in 1999, it didn't feel like an album. It felt like a sonic terrorism tactic in an increasingly escalated arms race for extremity. The Dillinger Escape Plan came out of New Jersey swinging with pure chaos science. Guitars spiraling out, drums snapping through impossible tempo changes, and Dmitry Minanakis screaming like he's being electrocuted. At the center was drummer Chris Penny, a human metronome with a jazz brain and cyborg limbs, locking every jagged time signature into place. But the mastermind was always guitarist Ben Wyman, whose vision for controlled demolition guided Dillinger through this record and beyond. Produced by Steve Evans, Calculating Infinity had unwittingly created a new standard that other bands would have to scramble to meet. This wasn't a scene evolving, it was two coasts racing towards a singularity, and Dillinger made sure nobody walked away unscathed. By the time We Are the Romans dropped in late 1999, it felt like the genre had reached a breaking point. If Calculating Infinity was the East Coast precision strike, Romans was the Pacific Northwest counteroffensive, less frantic, more methodical, and just as devastating. Botch didn't just play heavier or faster, they dismantled metallic hardcore for parts and rebuilt it into a low-drag killing machine. But this wasn't hardcore with metal riffs tacked on, it was structural collapse with intent. Dissonant, technical, and relentlessly precise. Dave Varell embarked like he was calling it airstrikes, while the band stitched together chaos with mathematical clarity. And behind the board was Matt Bayless, future architect of records by Isis, Mastodon, and Minus the Bear, capturing a blistering live sound of a band operating at an apex only a handful of contemporaries could even approach. Romans wasn't a progression, it was a controlled demolition, wiping the slate clean and redrawing the blueprint for what heavy music could become. Let's get it out of the way. Jane Doe came out in 2001, not in the 90s. But to talk about metallic hardcore without including it would be like ending a story a page too early. This wasn't just a record, it was a culmination of everything the genre had been building towards. Jane Doe took the fury and chaos of 90s underground and stretched it into something vast, emotional, and borderline mythic. Jacob Bannon's raw-throated wails felt less like vocals and more like psychic purging, while Kurt Blue's production turned every jagged riff and off-kilter rhythm into an avalanche. Its sound was undeniable, but so was its image. That stark, spectral cover became a tattoo, a t-shirt, and eventually even a lawsuit. The point is, you didn't just listen to Jane Doe, you wore it like a badge of initiation. This was the sound of a scene reaching its final form, a capstone on the monument of an era, and the official last word in a decade defined by transformative aggression.